In our society, media and culture is very strongly related to each other. Culture shapes media and media shapes culture. The mannerisms, opinions, etc. portrayed in media are directly reflected by the culture of the time when the set media was produced in. Just go and watch movies from 1920s or something and you will have a very tough time finding a movie which you can relate with. Because the culture then was vastly different from now. But at the same time, media also directly influences culture, as the ideas and opinions they present are ultimately consumed by us, the audience. Even more now, as more media is being produced and consumed faster than ever before. And media depicts some parts of our culture by either talking about it directly or leaving subtle hints, or even not talking about it at all, which is very interesting because this means that we can extract a conversation out of media which has almost nothing to do with the topic of a conversation. For example, today I'll be talking about anime in the context of masculinity. Now you might think that talking about such a heavy topic on the basis of children's cartoon is outlandish. Because after all, what we get after watching anime is entertainment and some morals or ideologies of certain characters passed down to us. However, there are two key words here: morals and ideologies. Shonen anime specifically influences us a lot, especially young boys. Literally, the target audience of shonen is young boys. So shonen anime turns out to be a great place to look for cultural ideas of masculinity. And that is exactly what we are doing today. I have picked some characters from random series and let's see how they depict masculinity, both negatively and positively. Before starting this segment, it's important to understand what traditional masculinity even means. Basically, think of a macho man, a real man, who works hard, earns bread for the family, never helps out in household works, never sheds a single tear, and only rarely hugs his loved ones. This is also described as toxic masculinity in modern discussions because it legit harms everyone around the man and the man himself. Something I believe anime exposes and shows. Starting this list, we have none other than Endeavor himself. Enji Todoroki is toxic masculinity at its peak. A strong, intimidating and imposing man who achieved such highs all through his drive and passion to be the best. He is professional to the core and hates wasting his time on stuff that won't end up being productive for him. Patriarchy is one of his character traits. He dictates his family according to his will and lashes on them if they don't act according to his rules. He abused his wife and his children for the sole purpose of achieving his goal. He completely ruined Todoroki's childhood. At the age of playing and having fun, he forced Todoroki to train and become strong under him. Toya dies because Endeavor never acknowledged him. He married his wife not because of love, but because he needed her ice powers so that their kid can be born with both fire and ice abilities. In short, Endeavor is a horrible person. And yet, he's my favorite character from the series. Cause as I said before, anime exposes and shows the negative side of toxic masculinity. Endeavor's life is a mess. His ambitions have completely hollowed him out. He knows he can't be number one, so now he compensates the void in his life with foolish attempts at greatness. Attempts that would rip his family apart and cause them to suffer from mental difficulties like depression. His long attachment to the toxic traits of traditional masculinity end up ruining his life. His past achievements and greatness means nothing now. He sinks into this void created by his own toxic masculinity, and all that is left now is a broken man who regrets every decision he ever made. We do get to see a redemption arc of his since the end of this amazing fight in season 4, and yes, in a lot of ways he does try to atone for his family, but the damage he has done now is simply too much, and the series never lets you forget this. This is why Endeavor's character is so interesting to follow. We know he's a piece of shit, but we can't ignore his efforts to get better. The next character on this list is Jiraiya. Now Jiraiya does not have a patriarchal issue, but he possesses another negative trait of traditional masculinity, which is objectifying women or behaving as if they are entitled to women's bodies, which obviously is wrong. Jiraiya goes around in nonsense to spy and sexually harass women in the name of his research, and on top of that he exposed an underage Naruto to adult media and also passed sexual comments on Naruto, who is literally his student.
Wow! Amazing! Huh? You have quite a tight, sexy little body.
By the way, Naruto is 13 and Jiraiya is 50 at this point in the story. Yeah, I know it's weird. The major problem I have with this aspect of Naruto is that it never shows his behavior as a bad thing to do. I'm not saying Naruto promotes this horrible stuff, but at the same time they use this character trait of Jiraiya to create comedy out of it, which sends a very wrong message to the young audience of the show. Positive masculinity focuses more on deconstructing the notion of gender roles, which creates a new kind of man. A man who is in touch with his emotions, who will cry and break down over stuff, who doesn't have to prove himself by the standards of toxic masculinity, and who is involved in traditionally feminine activities like childcare and cooking. And starting this list, we have Shoto Todoroki, Endeavor's youngest child. We all know that a father plays a significant role in the upbringing of his children, because as a kid you look up to your father and want to one day become like him. He's your hero, especially if you don't have older siblings that are close to you and positively influence you. But this statement is completely flipped on its face when we talk about Shoto, because he hates his father and never wants to become like him. He defies everything his father wants and never stands by his father's beliefs. But in doing so, Shoto becomes the type of person who he hates the most. A cold-hearted being who only cares about his goals. He falls under the same bracket of masculinity as his hated father, a self-destructive passion that leads him to ignore everything else, including the positive emotions and ideas of self-worth his mother tried putting in him. He desires to defy his father so much that he ends up holding himself back from achieving the things he wants himself. By deciding not to use his fire power and only relies on using the ice power he got from his mother. Ironically, Shoto has basically become Endeavor Light. His entire character lacks any personality and only revolves around defying his father. In the sports festival where everyone are giving their best to win this tournament and take a step forward in their hero journeys, and all that Shoto can think of is how to go against his father. The same way that Endeavor allowed his ambition to swallow up everything else about him, Shoto was also on the verge of letting go of everything he is and making his entire personality about his hatred for Endeavor. It takes Deku to finally beat some sense in his mind for him to realize just how damaging this all is for him. From this moment onward, Shoto stops thinking about his powers or his goals and simply does what makes him feel happy. He actually thinks about himself not in terms of strength but on an emotional level. By even allowing himself to ask how does he feel in the first place, he separates himself from the blind toxic masculinity of Endeavor and moves on to become a way better person who takes care of his family and also his own emotions. Next in the list is Mob. He has no struggles in terms of abilities and he far outclasses the majority of his enemies. But Mob doesn't really care about powers. He just wants to have healthy relationships with people around him because he genuinely believes that everyone he's in touch with adds meaning to his life. In a lot of ways, Mob feels like a character specifically made to show the difference between toxic and positive masculinity. He suppresses his emotions to the point where he explodes, which negatively impacts him and the people around him. He lashes out at enemies and friends, showing no mercy at all. He drowns his emotions until he can't contain them anymore and implodes. But as I mentioned before, the people around him actually change him for the better. Rain teaches him redemption, that people can change their bad behavior and make a turn for good. Emi teaches him the difference between fake and meaningful bonds. The Body Improvement Club teaches him the power of self-control and hard work. He values the people in his life because he knows that they make him a better person. By the end of the story, Mob is at a better place in his life than ever before. He now has a better understanding of how to control his emotions and powers. He has a close circle of friends who have shaped him into becoming a better person. It's important to note that without these people, Mob can be a really horrible person, and at times he commits mass atrocities without considering the consequences of his actions. The relationships he had with others saved him from himself. And the final character of the video, to no one's surprise, is Deku. For a long time now, Deku's relentless crying is seen as a flaw in his character. And of course, in no way is Deku the first character in shonen to freely express his emotions. Many characters like Naruto and Luffy are pretty upfront with their emotions. But the difference here is that in a lot of these cases, the characters still need an excuse to express their emotions. Naruto and Luffy are allowed to be emotional, but only when the entire world is at stake. This says that men are allowed to be emotional, but only when the stakes are higher than ever. In short, this is done so that the characters can be emotional, but at the same time the audience doesn't lose respect for them. But on the other hand, Deku does not leave a single opportunity to lay off his waterworks. The world does not need to collapse for Deku to feel emotional. He does not cry because his entire family got murdered or his best friend just died, but he cries because he is worried, because he is anxious, because he is intimidated, and whether you like it or not, the message here is clear. It's okay for a man to be emotional. The world is a scary place, and sometimes things that nobody but you care about will upset you, and it's okay to shed a tear over it. Deku's waterworks are sometimes used for comedic purposes, but Deku is generally shown as a capable and smart man. His emotionality doesn't detract from the fact that he's a courageous hero, but it adds to it. Deku's emotionality is not portrayed as a negative trait, but as a normal human reaction to everyday stress. And through this, Deku sends out a very progressive message to the audience. Being a man does not mean being unemotional, but also being emotional does not make you any less of a man. Emotions are a part of being human, and denying that to yourself solely to satisfy gender roles set by stupid dead men will never be healthy in the long run. And considering that shonen is mostly consumed by young teenage boys, I think this is a very touching message to send. And at last, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you guys the next time. Bye.